There are moments in life that stick with you forever. For me, it was when I decided to turn my back on everything I'd built over 15 years. That October morning, while I was sorting out the last documents in my folder, I took one final look at the photo on my desk. Me, hugging Nathan and Emma on a beach day. Genuine smiles, true love. At least, that's what I believed. The clock said 6 in the morning when I shut the front door, leaving behind not only a family but years of dedication and care. Many would call me a coward for leaving the way I did, but few would understand that my departure was the result of a long, painful process of self-preservation. This is my story, not of a defeat, but of how I learned that self-love and dignity need to go hand in hand with any kind of love. Subscribe to the channel and hit the like button to access more stories like this. I met Sarah at a company party 15 years ago. There was something in her eyes, a mix of strength and sadness, that grabbed me right away. That night, between conversations and laughs, I found out she was a widow. Her husband, a soldier, had died in service in the Middle East. Nathan, her 4-year-old son, was having a hard time adjusting, and baby Emma would never get to know her biological father. Our relationship naturally took its course. Sarah was unlike anyone I had ever met, determined, smart, and with a one-of-a-kind sense of humor. For the first few months, we kept our meetings low-key, always thinking about the kids' well-being. Nathan, who was shy at first, started opening up to me during our video game sessions and walks in the park, and little Emma would smile every time I walked into the room. The wedding was a simple ceremony with only a few guests. I remember the moment when Nathan, holding his little sister's hand, handed over the rings. At that moment, I made a silent promise to be the best dad those kids could have. I moved into their home and started to reorganize my life around the family. My job as a project manager at a construction company gave me a comfortable life. I got Nathan enrolled in a private school and Emma went to a great daycare. Little by little, we set up a routine. Evenings were filled with family dinners, helping with schoolwork, and bedtime stories. Weekends were all about outings, movies, and little adventures that brought us closer together. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I had finally found my place in the world. The following years were all about growth and mutual adaptation. Nathan, who used to call me by my first name, started calling me Dad on his 7th birthday, a moment I still cherish. Emma, who pretty much grew up seeing me as her father figure, didn't know any other reality. Whether at school meetings, family gatherings, or social events, we were seen as the perfect example of a blended family. I invested time and resources in their development. Nathan showed a talent for sports, so I signed him up for swimming and soccer classes. Emma had a natural artistic flair, which pushed me to enroll her in piano and painting lessons. Every little achievement of theirs was celebrated as if it were my own victory. Nathan's medals from school competitions and Emma's drawings proudly decorated the walls of our home. Sarah and I formed a solid partnership when it came to raising the kids. We set clear rules while always keeping the lines of communication open. During vacations, we planned family trips. It was on one of these trips, while camping, that Nathan confided to me his wish to follow a military career, just like his biological father. I supported his decision, but also showed him other possibilities for his future. Time went by, and our family dynamic grew stronger. I attended every one of Emma's piano recitals, even when it meant having to shuffle my work schedule. On stormy nights, when she was scared, she'd run to my room for comfort. And Nathan, in his own way, looked to me for advice on girls and life decisions. In his school essays about family, he always mentioned me as his dad, which filled me with pride. I set up an office in the basement, where I would spend a few hours after work taking care of the family's finances and planning our future. I opened savings accounts for both their college funds and kept a strict financial plan to ensure they'd never be lacking. The walls of that office also held special moments, birthday photos, graduation snapshots, and family memories that documented our journey together. Sarah often commented on how I had positively transformed their lives, filling a void that had seemed impossible to fill. Little did I know that this apparent harmony was about to change drastically. The change started subtly when Nathan turned 17. The friendly conversations turned into one-word answers and looks of disdain. At first I chalked it up to typical teenage rebellion, but soon I realized there was something deeper going on. During a family dinner, Nathan began to address me by my first name, ditching the dad he'd used for years. Emma, now 14, started following in her brother's footsteps, mimicking his behavior. Family meals, once sharing moments of connection, turned into silent, tense affairs. I noticed that Sarah, instead of stepping in, seemed to be subtly encouraging this change. Whenever I tried to set boundaries or talk about mutual respect, she'd downplay it. They're just teenagers being teenagers. But I knew it was more than that. In private conversations with Nathan, I'd hear comments like, "You're not my real dad," or "You can't tell me what to do." Emma, who had always been really close to me, started skipping our traditional movie nights. When I would ask about her low grades or questionable behavior, she'd quickly run to Sarah, who comforted her by saying I was being too strict. My authority as a father was being systematically eroded. The gifts I bought were met with indifference. The ticket to Nathan's favorite band's concert was left sitting on the table with no thanks. The professional art supplies I gave Emma at Christmas sat untouched in her room. Any attempt at conversation was met with either hostility or apathy. One night, when I was setting a curfew for Nathan after a party, I was met with an explosion of anger. "You don't get to boss me around. My real dad was a hero. You're just the guy my mom set up." Sarah, who was present during the confrontation, stayed silent, her inaction louder than any word. In that moment, I realized that the bonds I thought we had built were falling apart, and the respect I believed I'd earned had never truly been there. The domestic situation deteriorated fast. One particularly tense afternoon, I found Sarah going through my personal documents in my office. When I asked her about it, she replied coldly, "I need to know exactly how much you make. After all, you're responsible for supporting my kids." Those words hit me like a punch to the gut. They weren't our kids anymore, they were your kids. During a family meeting, Sarah openly revealed her true thoughts to everyone. "Michael is just a provider. I never wanted him to replace the kid's real father." The relatives, who had treated me as part of the family for years, now glanced at me with a mix of pity and disdain. Nathan smirked as he listened to his mother's words, while Emma kept her eyes glued to her phone, deliberately ignoring me. The taunts grew more frequent. Nathan started bringing friends over without permission, hosting raucous parties when I needed to rest for work the next day. Whenever I tried to enforce rules, Sarah would step in. "Let the boys have some fun, you're just being paranoid." The respect I had built over 15 years was being chipped away day by day. Emma, who used to be my partner during board games, now refused to sit at the table with me. I later discovered she had torn up all our old photos together, including that special one of the day I taught her how to ride a bike. When I confronted Sarah about the kids' behavior, she simply said, "They're just showing how they really feel. You were never really their dad." Even the college accounts I had set up for them were questioned. Sarah demanded total access, claiming it was her right as their mother. When I refused, I was accused of trying to control the family with money. Nathan began making snide comments about how I probably had other families hidden away, trying to justify my stinginess. The atmosphere at home became unbearable. My personal belongings started disappearing mysteriously. My collection of old watches, an inheritance from my dad, vanished from the office. When I asked, Sarah suggested I must have stored them somewhere and forgotten. Later, I found fragments of one of the watches in the backyard, clearly ruined on purpose. The most painful blow came when I discovered that Sarah was manipulating the kids with lies about me. I accidentally overheard a conversation where she told Emma that I never really wanted to be their dad and that I was with them only out of pity. Her words were meant to tear apart any bond that might still exist. And Nathan, on the other hand, was spreading rumors in the neighborhood that I was controlling and abusive, tarnishing the reputation I had worked so hard to build in the community. Every day brought a new form of disrespect, a new way of making me feel like an outsider in my own home. The dream I had built for my family was turning into a nightmare from which I desperately needed to wake up. The turning point came one Tuesday night. I was in my office reviewing some documents when I got a notification from the new security system I'd installed. When I checked the cameras, my heart stopped for a moment. There were Nathan and Emma in the parking lot of my company, scratching my car with keys and spray paint. The footage was clear, no doubt about it. I watched the recording over and over, still in disbelief. Nathan was leading the charge while Emma acted as lookout. Amidst their laughter, they vandalized the car I'd painstakingly saved for after years of hard work. In the footage, you could even see their lips moving out words filled with contempt for me. The worst part wasn't the material damage. It was the look of satisfaction on their faces as they did it. The next day, I pretended nothing had happened. When I got home, Sarah casually mentioned the vandalism, saying something like, "It's just neighborhood teens." I kept my cool and agreed, but something inside me had broken for good. That night, I couldn't sleep. I went over the past years in my mind, with all the happy memories now stained by this cruel reality. In the days that followed, I discreetly installed more cameras around my properties. That decision proved to be the right one because a week later, I caught Nathan using my basement office while I was away. He was rifling through my documents while Emma stood guard by the stairs. On another occasion, I caught them purposely destroying expensive equipment from my home office. The most painful moment came when I accessed recordings from the audio system. In a conversation in the kitchen, I heard Sarah instructing the kids on how to manipulate me for more money. "He isn't really family, he's just someone who helps us out financially. We shouldn't give him any special treatment." Her words confirmed what I'd been suspecting. All those years of family dedication meant nothing to them. Step by step, I began gathering all the evidence. I photographed every bit of damage, saved all the recordings, and documented each incident of disrespect and vandalism. I also discreetly hired a family lawyer to understand my legal obligations and rights. The advice was clear. Since I hadn't legally adopted the kids, my financial responsibilities were limited. For a month, I maintained a facade of normalcy as I meticulously planned my exit. I transferred important documents to a safe place, organized my finances, and prepared a new place to live. Every fake smile from them, every masked moment of disrespect, only solidified my decision. What bothered me the most wasn't the material loss. It was the satisfaction they got from hurting me. One of the last recordings even captured a conversation between the siblings planning how they'd drain my savings for their future college funds, laughing about how I was such a sucker for supporting everything. Sarah in the background just laughed, complicit in the manipulation of her own kids. That recording was the last straw. It wasn't just teenage ingratitude. It was a deliberate scheme of exploitation that had been nurtured over the years. One Thursday morning, I put my plan into action. I woke up earlier than usual, grabbed my folder of essential documents, and took one last look at the room where I'd slept for 15 years. Sarah was still asleep, unaware of what was about to happen. In the hallway, I passed by Nathan's and Emma's rooms, their doors as closed to me as they had been in recent months. I left an envelope on the kitchen table containing 3 letters, one for Sarah, one for Nathan, and one for Emma. In those letters, there was no resentment or accusations, just the realization that our paths needed to part ways. Along with the letters, I included documents showing all the transfers I'd made over the years to their education accounts, proving that I had never touched that money. My lawyer had already prepared all the necessary documentation. The evidence of vandalism and manipulation was safely stored, not to use against them, but to protect myself from any future accusations. The house and the car would stay with them. Material possessions no longer mattered to me. My only concern was preserving my dignity and professional reputation. I started the car in silence, taking one final look at the house I'd helped turn into a home. In the rearview mirror, I saw the light from Emma's room turn on. For a moment, my hand hesitated on the ignition, but the recent recordings and all the disrespect gave me the strength to leave. There was no room for second chances. I drove to my new apartment, a modest place but enough for a restart. On the way, I got the first messages from Sarah, initially confused, then angry. Nathan sent voice messages with thinly veiled threats, while Emma chose to stay as silent as ever. I turned off my phone and focused on the road ahead. At work, I'd already notified them of my new address and updated my banking details. My boss, who sort of knew my situation, offered discreet support and understanding. I spent the day immersed in meetings and projects, using work as an anchor to my new reality. That night, alone in my new space, I finally let my emotions out. I cried, not for the material loss or the time I'd invested, but for the end of a dream I had nurtured for so long. The old photos that once proudly decorated my desk were now boxed away, reminders of a life that was no more. In the days that followed, I received several attempts to contact me, mostly from Sarah, alternating between pleas and threats. My lawyer took over all communications, keeping things strictly professional and solely related to necessary legal matters. The stories they spread about my abandonment were neutralized by the evidence I'd collected. What surprised me the most was how much lighter I felt after leaving. The weight of constant surveillance, the fear of more attacks, and the daily disappointment had given way to a sense of freedom. It wasn't the ending I'd hoped for in our story, but it was the new beginning I needed. 6 months passed since I left. Life took a different turn, more peaceful and true to myself. I switched departments at work, took on new projects, and for the first time in years, I could fully focus on my professional growth. The promotions I had once turned down to prioritize family finally started coming my way. Sarah tried every possible way to re-establish contact, first through mutual friends, then via relatives. When she heard about my promotion, her attempts intensified. Nathan, who was about to start college, suddenly began sending cordial messages, mentioning nostalgia for the old times. I recognized the pattern. It wasn't affection, it was opportunity. Emma was the only one who showed something close to genuine remorse. Through a letter delivered by her piano teacher, a professional who always maintained a good relationship with me, she expressed confusion over her feelings and actions. I replied with a brief, kind letter, wishing her success while still holding to the boundaries I'd set. The money I'd saved for their college funds remained untouched in the accounts I'd set up. It was a commitment I had made, and despite everything, I decided to honor it. However, I set clear rules through my lawyer. The money would only be released upon proof of enrollment and satisfactory academic performance. One Sunday afternoon, while organizing my new apartment, I came across an old photo album. The images from birthdays, graduations, and trips no longer stung as sharply as they once did. Now I saw those moments as chapters of a book that needed to be closed so a new story could begin. I started therapy, not to try and understand their motives, but to figure out why I let things go so far. I discovered recurring patterns in my life, a near-compulsive need to prove my worth by caring for others, even when that care wasn't recognized or reciprocated. Support came from unexpected places, colleagues who became true friends, neighbors who offered companionship without demands, and even some of the parents from the kids' old school, who, knowing how dedicated I had been, stood by my side. I also picked up running, an activity I'd always put off due to lack of time. In my first races, I learned that the endurance needed to finish a marathon wasn't far off from the strength I had to rebuild my life. Every mile was a personal victory. Every goal reached a reminder of my ability to overcome. Today, when I look back, I don't just see pain and betrayal. I see valuable lessons about self-love, dignity, and the importance of setting healthy boundaries. The family I tried to build might not have been real, but the personal growth I got through all of this is genuine and transformative. The future now looks like a blank page, ready to be filled with more wisdom and self-care. I have no regrets, only the certainty that sometimes leaving is the greatest act of love you can do for yourself. A year after my departure, I got an unexpected email from Nathan. His first college didn't work out, and he finally decided to follow his dream of joining the armed forces, just like his biological father. In the message, he admitted that his past actions were driven by misplaced anger and blind loyalty to a memory he barely knew. Emma, now 15, continued with her piano lessons. At her year-end recital, her teacher sent me a video of her playing the song we used to listen to together. I didn't reply, but I kept the video as a reminder that not everything was in vain. As for Sarah, she stopped trying to make contact once she realized my decision was final. My life had taken a surprisingly positive turn. I met people who accepted me for who I am, without unrealistic expectations or hidden manipulations. I developed new hobbies, traveled to places I'd always wanted to see, and most importantly, learned to find happiness in my own company. The money for their college funds remains safely growing with interest. It's a commitment I still honor, not out of obligation, but as proof to myself that my actions were always genuine. If one day they decide to use this resource for their education, they'll know that despite everything, there was truth in the care I provided. Sometimes I still dream about those years as a family, but now those dreams don't bring the acute pain of the early days. Instead, they serve as a reminder that every experience, even the painful ones, contributed to my growth. The fatherhood I gave, even if it wasn't fully recognized, taught me about unconditional love, including self-love. Today, when someone asks me what family means, I calmly reply that family goes way beyond blood ties or legal roles. It's about respect, reciprocity, and true love. I learned that sometimes you have to let go in order to move forward, and that decision, even though it was hard, might be the bravest thing you ever do. 2 years have passed since that October morning. Recently, during a morning run, I unexpectedly bumped into Emma at the park. She's taller now, more mature, carrying her art supplies. Our eyes met briefly, and I realized that time had softened the hard edges of the pain. We exchanged a discreet wave and went on our separate ways. That brief encounter made me realize how life has its own way of healing wounds. We don't need big gestures or dramatic reconciliations to find peace. Sometimes a simple, silent acknowledgement of each other's existence is enough to provide closure. My new life has become solid and steady. That promotion at work put me in charge of international projects, and my personal experiences have made me a more empathetic mentor to young professionals. I've learned that our stories of loss and overcoming can serve as a beacon for others who are facing their own storms. The apartment that once felt so empty now reflects who I truly am. On the walls, alongside my marathon medals, are photos of new moments and achievements. I didn't erase the past. I just made room for new memories to blossom. I understood that family isn't just about who we create or choose, but also about who we become through our experiences. My story isn't about loss, it's about rebuilding. And in that rebuilding, I discovered one fundamental truth. Sometimes the end of one story is just the beginning of an even better one. Subscribe to the channel and hit the like button to access more stories like this.